Welcome to our career webinar on the Medical Science Liaison role. We're so glad to have you joining us from all over today. And just to get things started, why don't you take a moment in the chat and tell us where you're joining from today? It's always really fun to see the global reach of the pharmaceutical industry and the attendees of ACMA's webinars. We'll just give everyone about a minute or two to join in, and then we'll officially get started. I see my FAMU classmate. Thank you for joining, Ebony. I see Florida, very hot. I see Texas. I see West Coast and East Coast. Alrighty, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Kiana Dixon, and I am the moderator for today's session. ACMA, the Accreditation Council for Medical Affairs, is hosting this webinar to provide you with valuable insights and expertise on this critical topic of medical affairs and its role in the pharmaceutical industry and healthcare as a whole. Now, as providers of the official medical affairs certification, BCMAS, we understand the significant impact of the different players and the different roles that are involved in the medical affairs umbrella of responsibilities, including MSLs. And today, you will hear from an accomplished and experienced duo of MSL professionals. We have Janet Mastanduono and Teresa Kelly. During this webinar, I will interview both to share their unique experiences as MSLs and an MSL director, and to provide some insight to those that are interested in these roles. Janet and Teresa, can you both go ahead and give us a quick introduction into yourselves?
Sure. So first of all, thank you for having me at the seminar. It's my pleasure to talk about the MSL role, one which is near and dear to my heart. I have 25 years experience in this role, something that I didn't think that I was going to be 25 years in, but come to find out at the end of the day, it has been 25 years in this particular role, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. So it's my complete pleasure to talk about it today. As far as my background, I have a PhD in pharmacology. I'm also a clinical pharmacist by training, and I am board certified as a medical affairs specialist as well. Plus, I'm a fellow of the American Foundation for Pharmaceutical Education.
Thank you, Janet.
Hi, I'm Teresa Kelly, and I am a PharmD by training. I practiced for a little over 14 years in both specialty and community pharmacy before transitioning over to the MSL role about 2 years ago. I also have a master's in healthcare administration as well as the board certification in medical affairs. And thank you very much for having me today. I'm really excited to talk about the MSL role. It's still new to me, but like Janet said, I have loved every minute of it. And so I'm excited to chat.
I'm so glad to have you both here. Having your experiences from someone with plenty of years of experience and someone who is newer into the role, you really both bring different perspectives from a lot of our attendees and questions that come in that I've seen a lot. Now, to our attendees, you will have the chance to ask as many questions as you have for Janet and for Teresa, and we will approach those at the end. So please feel free to submit your questions throughout the presentation today, throughout the interview, as we get started and learn more about Janet and Teresa and see what insights and tips and tricks that they have to succeed as an MSL. All right, let's go ahead and get started. This will be a more traditional interview style where I have some questions for both Janet and Teresa. And as they answer, again, we will learn more about them and the MSL role. Now, just to go ahead and get us started, Janet, can you begin by explaining the role of a medical science liaison? What are those key responsibilities with this position?
Well, I mean, the word liaison itself means a link, right? So I look at myself as the field-based arm of medical affairs. I link the external environment to the internal environment. I'm truly responsible for bringing resources to those people in the external environment and bringing things back into the company as well. We are the link that connects the two. In terms of what we do, we look at it as like three big buckets, right? There's educational activities that we do. We provide a support for medical meetings, and we also have clinical research involvement. So three big buckets of activities where I spend my time. And as far as educational activities, MSLs have an in-depth knowledge not only about the company's products, but about the products within your therapeutic area of expertise. So it enables you to have peer-to-peer discussions over a wide range of topics, always providing accurate information and fair balance in your discussions. The extensive knowledge that the MSL can bring to the peer-to-peer discussion is something that's really highly valued by the healthcare practitioners that we interact with. And what this does for them, it brings them updated information. We have these extensive scientific discussions about patient care, about treatment options, about current guidelines for treatment, and hopefully down the road, that's going to translate into better care for patients. In terms of medical meeting support, we go to all the major congresses. So if you like to travel, if that's something that, appeals to you, you'll be attending some of the major medical meetings. So I cover the cardiovascular area predominantly. I go to AHA, ACC, Heart Failure Society, all the big medical meetings. We provide support for the medical booth there. So healthcare practitioners can come to us to talk about scientific questions, and we will be able to provide some answers at the medical meetings. We also go to the symposiums, right? And we listen to the clinical discussions that happen there. And that helps us have cutting edge knowledge about all the new data that's coming out. So we're more prepared to have those peer-to-peer discussions with people. In terms of clinical research, we can nominate investigator sites. So it's up to us to know what investigators are in our area. So we have to know what their capabilities are, what the capability is of the site, what kind of patients that they see. This way, we can more accurately nominate them for certain trials down the road. And if they do get selected for a trial, then we provide support for the site so that they understand the compound. We educate their research staff around the compound, and we check in with them regularly to make sure that any difficulties that they might be having, we can connect them to the right people internally that will be able to help them with those resources. So just very broadly, if you think of the job in terms of three big buckets, that's what we basically do. Now I'll turn it over to Teresa.
Yes, that was a really thorough explanation. So I don't want to repeat much of it, but really, I think for me, the way I look at it is there's two main aspects of the MSL role. One is the communication part, and the other is the listening part. So, as Janet said, a lot of our role as an MSL involves scientific communication, providing that fair, balanced information on the disease state, the medication, the clinical trials, to the key opinion leaders and healthcare providers that we work with. But just as important is that listening aspect, in order to be able to gather insights and bring those back to the company. So really that is accomplished by forming relationships with those KOLs or key opinion leaders and healthcare providers, really digging in and learning what their questions are about the data, about the disease state, what their needs are, what data gaps they see, and then being able to tell a story with the data that we have in a fair and balanced way. Also being able to identify key pieces of information from the healthcare provider regarding their practice, any roadblocks or issues that they have, and be able to bring these actionable insights back to the company. These insights can help drive not only medical strategy, but also ongoing conversations and relationships with those KOLs.
Interesting. So what I heard Janet mention was that you're essentially the link. And when I heard Janet explaining those responsibilities, it seemed like the medical science liaison is flushing information, expertise from their organization to the HCPs. And then from Teresa, we heard a double or an opposite side that they also feed information from the HCPs to their organization.
Yes, we do the same. We bring insights back into the company as well. It's a two-way street, right? That's what a relationship is all about, where you're educating externally, but you're also bringing information back in too. That they're key opinion leaders for a reason. We value their opinions, and others value their opinions too. So one of the big jobs that we do have as MSLs is to bring those insights back into the company.
Interesting. So you build relationships both externally and internally to your colleagues as well.
Yes.
That's it. So to you, what is a typical day like for you as a medical science liaison? Can you walk us through your daily activities?
Well, as I mentioned, those three big buckets of activities that we do, you're charged with doing that in your area of responsibility, right? Now, when I say area of responsibility, it depends on what company you work for. Like I'm therapeutically aligned, where I personally cover the cardiovascular therapeutic area, so that's my area of expertise, and my geographic area is the Long Island area, so I'm responsible for that area. So I am responsible for those buckets of activities that I talked about just previously for that therapeutic area in that geographic area that I'm responsible for. So that's my area. Other companies may have much bigger, geographic areas. Some MSLs travel a lot, to get to the places that they need to do these activities. I don't travel as much. I do travel for major medical meetings, but my area of responsibility is very concentrated. Like the New York area, there's a lot of people to interact with. Some companies have much bigger therapeutic areas and geographic areas. Some people cover 3 and 4 therapeutic areas. When I first started with my company, I covered 5 therapeutic areas for all of New York State. That has evolved now, and I only cover cardiovascular for this particular region. So it's very different, company to company.
Interesting.
I would say every day is different. My territory is a little bit different than Janet's. I am based in the Midwest, and so I do have a bit more travel. I cover 3 states, so it's all driving for me. In my past role, I did have 10 states, so there I was flying more than driving. So every role is definitely different when it comes to territory size and everything. But some days I'm traveling and meeting with those HCPs and KOLs in person. Other days I'm working from home, either meeting virtually with the key opinion leaders, having internal meetings, having ongoing training with new data. Before every major medical conference, we have training regarding new data, and also just independently catching up on the latest information in my field. And as Janet mentioned, there's also, conferences, and we also travel for internal meetings. Part of what I like about this role is, the autonomy and the independence, but then also working on a team as well. So, the opportunity to be able to travel and meet with some of my internal colleagues for those meetings, a few times a year is also part of my role, and one that I look forward to very much.
Something that Teresa just said does particularly resonate with me as well. The fact that we want to meet with our KOLs in how they want to be met with, right? For example, virtually, you can do it phone, you can do it face to face. We've got a lot of flexibility in this role, but you always have to keep in mind, you want to meet with the person in the environment that is most comfortable for them. So if they want to meet with you face to face, by all means, you go and do that face to face meeting. A relationship really kind of needs a face-to-face component to it. Would you agree, Teresa? I mean, that is like the optimal type of a meeting that you would want to have. But now, since COVID, the virtual meeting has really come into the forefront. Well, years ago, we didn't have that. It was very odd or rare that you had an MS Teams meeting. I don't think we really knew what MS Teams was a couple of years ago, right? And now a lot of key opinion leaders really like the virtual format. Some people say, never call me by phone. And some people like to interact by phone. So knowing your key opinion leader, knowing what their preferred method of meeting would be, that's very important to building a relationship with someone. Because I always say you want to meet them where they want to be met, right? And tailor your visit around that.
With this being a field-based role, what percentage, I guess you would say, out of the week or maybe out of the day that you are traveling, you are in the field?
Well, for me, I try to be in the field every day, and that's the goal, right? Because you're field medical. What does field mean, right? You got to be in the field. You got to be meeting with your people, right? So my goal is if I can be out every day meeting with people and structuring my day where I'm actually having the goal is live interactions. If you can meet with somebody live time, that's key, right? So I strive for that, right? And I'm assuming, Teresa, do you feel the same way about the live meeting, or do you do things a little bit differently?
No, I do. I prefer the live meeting, but like you said, I always want to meet KOLs where they are. I do have some that really prefer virtual meetings, and some HCPs have institutional restrictions on pharma coming in, and so their virtual meeting is a way to be able to meet with that KOL.
Right. And then you have to be careful how you structure your meetings too, Kiana, because you don't know if a meeting is going to run over, right? You don't know if the HCP is going to get stuck with patients, right? And you're now, well, you had a meeting at 9 o'clock, now it's been moved to 11 o'clock, right? And if you are not careful about how you structure your day, you'd be running into meetings constantly and not being able to, be efficient. So one of the, you say the art and the science of being an MSL, part of the art of being an MSL is knowing how to structure your day so that your meetings are far enough spaced so that if you do run into a difficulty like that, you can adapt to it.
Now, on average, how long are your meetings with an HCP?
Well, they vary. They've been as much as an hour or 2 hours. They're very different from a sales call. These are not sales calls, right? These are meetings that you have, you prepare for in advance. You have, an appointment. Pretty much, what the discussion is going to be about. If it's bringing them data, you're prepared with the data. So it could vary. It could be any much from an hour and a half. Sometimes they're very quick, depending on the amount of time that a key opinion leader has for you. And again, some of the art of being an MSL is to know when to cut that meeting short, because patient care is the most important thing. So say you had an hour scheduled with this individual and come to find out he can only give you 10 minutes. The art of being an MSL is to be able to deliver what you came to deliver, but to tailor it for the time that you've been allotted to. You have to be very flexible in these types of positions.
Go ahead, Teresa, sorry.
Oh, no, I just had one thing to add. I would echo everything Janet said. I would also say, in my experience, it depends on the type of meeting. For me, as I'm building my territory and meeting the providers in my area for the first time, I am only asking for a short period of time, maybe 15 or 20 minutes for an introduction. And then as I build that relationship, find out what their questions are, what their data needs are, and have those more tailored meetings. That, in my experience, is when the meetings get a little bit longer and more in depth.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm hearing from you both is that you really have to be on your toes when it comes to communication, right? Knowing how to communicate with the type of HCP that you're interacting with, but also knowing how to shift in case you have to adapt really quickly, depending on how much time you have. And that goes back to what Janet mentioned, that art of being an MSL, right? It's not only knowing the clinical and the science behind your therapeutic area or your product, you also have to know that art of emotional intelligence, right? And building your communication style. And so, building on that a little more, what would you say are the essential skills and knowledge that's required to be successful in this role?
Just a very basic level, most MSL companies require that you have a doctoral degree, right? And then they don't qualify how the doctorate needs to look. For example, it could be a PhD, it could be a PharmD, it could be an MD, it could be osteopathic medicine physician. It could be even chiropractic. We've had people that have a chiropractic degree. So mostly, as an entry-level requirement, you need to have a doctoral degree because you're having peer-to-peer discussions. So it's doctor to doctor, right? And it really kind of elevates your credibility if you're coming to the conversation with a doctoral degree. So very, very entry-level. Most companies do require that, but for me, I think some of the essential things to be an MSL. First of all, you have to be a self-starter, right? You have to be somebody that can work with minimal day-to-day supervision, because you are we like to say, I am the CEO of my own territory, right? I am responsible for everything that happens here. How I do it is up to me. There are things that I have to do, but how I structure it is up to me. So you have to be someone who can manage a schedule that somebody's not on top of you, but you get what you need to get done because you're scheduling it all in, and someone who can get themselves out of their office. Because don't forget, we all have home offices, right? You do too, Teresa, right? You start out in a home office. You got to get yourself out every day and structure your day. And, that's how you build relationships and you build credibility in your field or your area of responsibility by being active and getting out and, doing every day what you need to do. Plus, I think having the right attitude is important. We have a saying, you hire for attitude, but you train for competence, right? So I would rather hire somebody that has a great attitude, and then I'll teach them the therapeutics. You can learn. Like, you have a doctoral degree, you're perfectly capable of learning the therapeutics, but you can't teach attitude. And you can't teach emotional intelligence. So I think those are some of the biggest things that you really need to have in order to be a successful MSL.
I would definitely agree. And I think communication skills, both scientific and more soft skills, relationship building skills, are something that's very important in the MSL role. We've talked a lot about that, being agile and being responsive to the questions and the needs of the healthcare providers in your territory. Another, I think, essential skill is a passion for lifelong learning. The specifics of the disease state and medications can be learned. Every company has, a very good training program at the beginning of your time. But without a passion for lifelong learning, it's going to be hard to stay up to date and stay engaged in the role. And then I think the only other thing I would say, especially, earlier on in your MSL career, is just it helps to have practical experience in the therapeutic area that you are applying for. That can be clinical experience or research experience, but, that's something that also helps to build your credibility when you're in the field and just makes those conversations with the healthcare providers a little bit more impactful. If you can not only speak to the data and the disease state area, but also your experience in that therapeutic area.
Yeah, that's very true, Teresa. Very well said. One other thing I'd like to add is you have to be also very patient and not have a very thin skin, because there will be times, and Teresa, I know you can, attest to this, where the person that you're speaking to really does not understand your role and may not see you as the scientific expert that you are because they're not familiar with an MSL role and might be at times dismissive, right? So if that happens to you, you can't have a thin skin, and you've got to think to yourself, all right, how do I let this person know who I am? How do I let them know that I am the therapeutic expert that they want to talk to? Maybe they weren't familiar with the role, like I said, not to take it personally. If you had a bad experience, okay, chalk it up to experience and move forward, right? Shake it off. Not everything is like that. It's very rare that happens. Like, Teresa, I don't know about you, but I could probably count it on one hand bad experiences that I have encountered where people didn't really understand, what I was bringing to them because they didn't know about the role. I remember every 5 of them, right? Because they're ingrained in my memory. But again, you can't have a thin skin about it. You got to shake it off and do better next time.
I think these are really great points. Now, the next question, building on top of that, we've expressed the skills, the attributes of a great MSL in order for you to succeed. How would you assess these skill sets when you're looking at a candidate who is looking for an MSL role on your specific team? Right? What aspects or components are you looking for in those candidates on an application?
Well, I don't think you can see much from an application, right? I mean, you'll get whatever skill they have from, a CV, right? You can see what they're capable of, but it's not until the candidate is in front of you and you're having that conversation with them. If that person feels comfortable to you, like someone who you want to sit down and have that conversation with, that's highly prized. Someone who brings a positive attitude to a conversation, someone who that when they're in front of a key opinion leader, there's a likability there where that person is going to want to be seen again by that person. Don't forget, if they don't enjoy the interactions that they had with you, they're less likely to see you again, regardless of what you're, bringing with them in terms of scientific knowledge. That interaction needs to be a pleasant interaction. So you will want someone that's easy to be, an easy conversationalist, someone who's pleasant to be with, has a pleasant demeanor, good communicator. As Teresa said previously, someone who's a good collaborator. You can tell right away whether someone is kind of me, or team, someone who thinks about the team versus they think about themselves as an individual contributor. Those are all highly prized attributes.
I agree. And I just want to preface my answer by saying I'm not a hiring manager, so I don't have direct experience in this. But through my experience in applying for MSL roles and at the companies I have worked with, especially if you don't have any previous MSL experience, I believe one thing that they do look for is that practical experience in the therapeutic area, either in research or in clinical experience. That can, be one thing that to highlight on your CV. And then I agree with Janet that really the most valuable part of the process is the interview, because, most places are really looking for that attitude, the cultural fit with the team, with the company, because, it's a independent role, but you do also work collaboratively, not only with your other MSLs, but in your matrix teams. So they are looking for someone with a good team player, collaborative attitude, and then again those strong communication skills, both the soft skills and the scientific communication skills.
Yeah, what Teresa said was very true. They actually do prefer previous MSL experience, when they're trying to hire for an MSL team. And that's the question I get a lot, Kiana, from other people who are trying to break into the role. How do I get an MSL job if I hadn't had an MSL job in the past? That is the ever-present question, right? It's hard. That first MSL job is extremely hard to get. The second MSL job is not, right? If you look at your LinkedIn inbox, you're going to see a lot of things from recruiters in there. People who are recruiting for, the forming MSL teams, they look at your LinkedIn profile, see you have MSL experience, and those jobs will come. But that first job, Kiana, it's really, really hard to get. Teresa and I were talking right before the telecon. Teresa was telling me about a contract MSL group that she used to work for called the Medical Affairs Company. I think that's a great route for somebody that's trying to break into the MSL role to, begin with a contract MSL group. Teresa, I'll turn it over to you, maybe to give some insight around that.
Absolutely. I think that was one thing I learned when preparing for the MSL role, was that not to shy away from the contract roles, because they're just as valuable of an experience. And one thing that I thought was particularly valuable is just the mentorship that I had in my first MSL role, because I was learning from my manager at the medical affairs company, as well as my manager at the pharmaceutical company, where I was an MSL at. And so I really learned a tremendous amount from both of those mentors, in that first role. And it really helped, prepare me for my current role and just learn about, medical affairs in general.
Nice. Thank you, Teresa. Now, we heard you in the beginning that you transitioned from direct clinical practice as a pharmacist into the MSL role. So thank you for sharing your career path, switching from that clinical role and then into that contract organization, and now still as an MSL. Janet, I'm interested to hear your career path that led to you becoming a medical science liaison. What were those key milestones for you?
Yeah, so mine was a little bit different, where I actually did get an MSL role right out of clinical. And this is a long time ago. See, again, I'm in industry a very long time. This is probably not even really possible right now. But what happened to me, I'll tell you a story. I was a clinical director, clinical pharmacy director for a hospital on Long Island, and also the director of drug information. So I had a big clinical background. I also had teaching experience, where I was a part of nurse practitioner education in one of the major universities out here. I taught pathophysiology and anatomy, full course, not just a guest lecturer. So I did that in my part-time. And then one day I got a call from a headhunter to my office as a clinical pharmacist, asking me if I wanted to interview for an MSL role. I didn't even know what an MSL was at the time, but it was a particularly bad day, right? And I said to myself, MSL industry, I don't know if I want to join industry, because you're both PharmDs. You can attest to the fact that when on the clinical side, we thought of industry as the dark side, right? The clinical side was, the prize, and industry, well, if you joined industry, it was the dark side. So I had a bias against industry from the get-go. Wasn't really sure I kind of wanted to interview for this job. but decided, look, let me give it a shot. I have nothing to lose. Let me find out about it. What they wanted was somebody, first of all, who had a doctoral degree, a PhD, in addition to being a clinical pharmacist. They wanted somebody that was a good clinician, had a lot of clinical experience, and they wanted someone that had teaching experience, like full teaching experience, like full course, not just a guest lecture now and then. I had all three. So that's how I was able to secure the role. And I never looked back. It was something that particularly, fit my skill set. I fell in love with the job from the very beginning, and truth be told, I would do it until I can't do it anymore, because every day is new and different, and I still enjoy it.
I agree. I love that idea of, you don't have the same thing every day. You have something that's new. You're interacting with multiple stakeholders. Even though you still get that experience in direct clinical practice, you're really still making an impact, just in a more indirect way.
Right. And, having the clinical experience makes you a better peer to peer in terms of having that discussion with the HCP, because you're coming from a patient care background, right? So when you say our patients or the patients that I've seen, or, use that terminology, it's true, because you have been a clinician, you worked with patients, you understand what the clinical side is. That's not to say that having a pure academic degree precludes you from an MSL role. It doesn't. You can still be a valuable MSL if you don't have clinical expertise. But what I'm saying is, when you're interviewing for that first job, that's one of the things that makes you attractive to a pharmaceutical company. The fact that you can hold yourself out as a clinician.
One way that I've been seeing, because I speak to a lot of individuals who are either in the MSL role or they're looking to transition, they're utilizing the board certification in order to make that transition or to
Mm-hmm.
build that expertise. And again, we're seeing that many MSLs in the pharma biotech field, they're becoming board certified with BCMS. What do you think the value of board certification for MSLs is? Why do you think BCMS has gotten so much traction?
Well, Teresa and I did it differently. Teresa became board certified before she came an MSL. I came late to the party, where I just got board certified a year or so ago. I did it because I did it for my own development. I had a lot of practical experience as an MSL, but I wanted to do a little bit more in terms of learning the ins and outs of medical affairs, right? So the certification I got was not MSL certified, but board certified medical affairs specialist. So it's different from just being certified as an MSL. I wanted to have an in-depth knowledge of all the other departments that I've been interfacing with for the last 25 years. Now, I know a little bit about everything, but not a whole lot about any of the departments. So what I found out when I got certified was the modules that I took gave me a really good background about, each of those departments, not only about what they did, but the compliance constraints that they work under, right? There are things that they're allowed to do and things that they're not allowed to do based on compliance. Same as an MSL, we have compliance constraints as well, and we're really serious about them. We take it very serious, in terms of ethics and compliance. Every department in medical affairs also have an ethics and compliance component to it. So it's really good for me to see that. And as I work on projects with them, in the future, and even in the present, I'm presently working on something with the medical affairs department, I have a better appreciation for them based on the things that I learned with those modules. So that's what I got out of it. So Teresa, why did you decide to do it before you became an MSL?
Really, the reason that I decided to do it before was a way for me to learn the fundamentals of field medical and medical affairs in general, as well as the compliance topics before landing my first role as an MSL. I wanted to be able to demonstrate when I was, applying and interviewing, that I had a baseline level of understanding of what medical affairs and the medical science liaison role was all about. Coming from a clinical pharmacist background, there are many differences in the way a pharmacist can interact with the prescriber versus how a medical science liaison can interact with a prescriber. So, even just having a solid understanding of some of those guardrails in terms of compliance helped me, as well as, like you said, Janet, learning about the other medical affairs roles and just the history of medical affairs and the pharma code and all of the things that really make up the foundation of medical affairs and field medical.
And it sounds like you both utilize board certification as one of your tools, right? Like in your toolbox of success. All the tools that you have, BCMS was one of those so that you can succeed better as an MSL and as well as a leader when you're interacting with your colleagues within medical affairs outside of just the MSL role as well. Now,
Yes.
when we're talking about those toolbox or the tools for success for an MSL, earlier you were both speaking on being up to date, speaking or being knowledgeable in your specific therapeutic area, right? How do you stay up to date with the evolving regulatory landscape going on and data surrounding your specific therapeutic area? Do you use any specific resources or tools that you rely on?
For me, I think, well, first of all, my company has excellent training programs. Excellent. I know I can't say enough about the type of therapeutic training we have, the compliance training we have, just general soft skills training. We have excellent training. So there's that. I also attend the major congresses. I attend the regional conferences as well. You can learn a lot by going to the CMA conferences in your general area. You don't even have to travel. And I try to go to as many conferences as I can to learn cutting edge information. And then I learn a lot from the peer-to-peer discussions that I have with clinicians, right? If you're sitting and you're talking to someone who is in direct patient care activities, you're going to learn a lot about, what gaps there are, in terms of therapeutics, what they are looking forward to in terms of what's coming down the pike, in terms of pipeline things, not just for your company, but for other companies too. We have some great scientific discussions about things that they're looking forward to. And I mostly enjoy hearing the voice of the patient, which is not something that we get a lot as MSLs. I don't know about you, Teresa, but I don't do anything with patients. My association with patients is through practitioners, where I can hear about how they're treating patients, but we don't talk to patients. For me, it's really important to hear those stories coming back to me, from the healthcare practitioners about the benefit that they saw with some of the drugs that they're using in the therapeutic area that we service, right? How a patient, could not walk 5 minutes. And now all of a sudden they're walking, miles because of the therapeutics that were given to them. It is heartwarming. It's especially heartwarming to work with a drug that's in the pipeline, right? And to see it come through the clinical trials and then to be launched and then now into the hands of patients, where patients' lives are being improved. Patients are not being hospitalized. Patients are not dying. And that you were part of that whole journey. Very rewarding. So, how do I learn? I learn day to day. I learn from the practitioners. I learn from the programs we have, and we learn from each other. So, that's my story. Teresa?
That's that continuous learning Teresa mentioned.
Yep.
Definitely. I would agree with everything that Janet said. Being able to attend conferences is a huge help in staying current in the field, both with the disease state and with different therapeutic areas and clinical trials, medications that are in the pipeline for your therapeutic area, and then just gaining HCP perspectives from being at those conferences. I learn a lot about the insights that I gather from the providers in my area. But, there are different regional and geographic differences in terms of practice patterns and everything. So attending those major national conferences helps broaden my perspective. I also, have a lot of outstanding internal training opportunities for both, the newest data as well as, MSL soft skills and, compliance from my organization. I also like to, for more of the, field medical and medical affairs, staying up to date, I like to utilize, webinars like this through ACMA, the Medical Science Liaison Society, and others. They have regular webinars on a variety of different topics that I find really helpful to stay on top of things. I also, utilize things like, PubMed alerts for new publications in my therapeutic area, and just email lists from different organizations, like AAN for me in neurology. And so just being able to get that information from different sources, both, with training and, more in a passive way through, new publications and email lists, is the combination that I like to stay up to date.
I love it. It sounds like it's very fitting because if you describe the MSL role as this middleman, middlewoman, or bridge between the pharma organization and then the HCPs, you're also using that bridge for the information that you need, right? To maintain your expertise, both from your organization as well as thought leaders, those patient advocacy organizations, those medical congresses, HCPs, and patients themselves. So it's very fitting for that role. Now, we're approaching the last 20 minutes here of our webinar. Before I open the floor to answer the questions that have come in, I do have one last question for you. Discussing the MSL role, what advice would you give to someone who is interested in pursuing a career as an MSL? What steps would you recommend they take in order to prepare for it?
Well, the advice that I would give anyone is to try your very best to get one of these roles, right? We had a director that used to say the MSL role is the best role in the industry, and it truly is. So set your goal to try and get one of these jobs and do your very best to get it. Now, what does that mean? That means to interview for every position that becomes available to you, whether you think you have the qualifications or not. Put your hat in the ring, and you never know when there's something that's going to be attractive, to the person that's interviewing you, and you might get that live interview. So interview as much as possible. Don't be disheartened if you don't get the job. Keep trying. Try to network with other MSLs that already have jobs. Do your internal networking with them to see if maybe you can field shadow somebody. Maybe you can, get a leg up into understanding what certain organizations are like and, what they require. I would definitely go the contract MSL route if you don't have an MSL experience. And really just don't give up. Keep trying.
Yeah, I would agree. It's definitely not something that is easy to transition into. It does take persistence. And I would say, even before, if this is a really new thought to you, I would recommend some self-reflection too. I think the medical science liaison role is wonderful, but I do think it's not for everyone. If you really don't like to travel, if you really like your structure at your job provided to you, rather than having that autonomy, it might not be the right role for you. Even something as simple as I don't really like to drive. That is something that you really want to make sure, both the nitty gritty of the role in terms of the scientific communication and ongoing learning, as well as the practical parts like the travel and the conference attendance and things like that. You want to just make sure that it is a good fit for you, because I thrive on all that. But if you don't, if you're a homebody, if you like to have the same schedule every single day and have things be very predictable, it might not be the right role for you. Once you have decided for sure that it is, then, one thing I would also recommend is networking. If you have any former colleagues or friends or, connections on LinkedIn that are in the industry, current medical science liaisons, I would recommend reaching out to them to learn from their experiences. That's something that I did in preparation for this role. And, there were a lot of really kind and generous, MSLs that gave me some of their time to talk to me about the role. And so, I've tried to do the same thing now. And, I think that's the best way to learn, is from someone that is already in the role.
I agree. The MSL role, speaking to individuals that are either looking to break in or they're somewhere else in medical affairs, the MSL role seems like the most popular, the most common role that really has a lot of interest from individuals. And the answer that I've heard the most, and I've heard you both mention it and touch on it, is to really make sure that this is the role for you. It's very popular. All eyes are on this role, but I would suggest finding the role that fits you versus you trying to fit into the box of a role that you see. Hopefully hopefully this webinar is expressing and showing you the full scope of the medical science liaison role, and you're seeing if this actually fits into your practice. Are you a great communicator? Do you like to travel? Those skills, those knowledge bases that you need. Is this something that really is a great fit for you? If not, we have some other webinars that you should check out. All right, so this concludes the interview portion, the question portion for Janet and Teresa. today. I do want to open the floor. I see a lot of questions have come in for our speakers. I'm very excited. We can go ahead and start answering those. A common question that I see is, will this be recorded or posted on YouTube? The answer is yes. All of our webinars are recorded and posted on our website. All right, first question from Jacob. What are your strategies for identifying and engaging with new KOLs? Do you start with cold calls or does your company have a list of desirable KOLs? Great question.
Well, a lot of forming the relationships is to really kind of understand who the key people in your area of expertise are. Like, who are the people that are, the leads for the systems of care? Who are the people that are, as we say, key opinion leaders? Who do other people refer to? Who are people that, drive opinions? Who are people that are on a national level, a regional level, a local level? You get a pretty good sense of who these people are just by doing your background research, right? Then you will reach out to them. I would never cold call somebody. Some people do cold calls. That's not something that I would do. I will send them an email, an invitation and ask them if I could come and meet with them. But I would never, just drop in on somebody and just introduce myself. I will, however, ask for an introduction from someone who may know them, right? So there are various, avenues that you can use in order to be put in contact with somebody. Again, use your colleagues, use people from your, not use, but have the help of some of the people from your own clinical background. Like, you're coming from a pharmacy background, Teresa comes from a pharmacy background. There are people within your old network that know other people that could introduce you to. So if you're trying to break brand new into a territory, that's what I would do. But most often you're taking over somebody's territory, right? It's usually not a brand new territory. So you will probably have some people that have been seen in the past by the MSL, so it's already developed, a group of people that have an ongoing relationship with your predecessor. You could start with them.
I agree. And in my experience, some companies do have lists of KOLs, but usually those still need to be vetted. You still need to do your research, like Janet said. There are also sometimes some technology platforms that can help. I've had experience with Monocle, where you can search different therapeutic areas and different geographic areas to help identify key opinion leaders in your area. And then I also agree. I start off with an email, and I also look for those, cross-functional introductions. If I'm new to the territory, but say my, national account specialist is not new, I may compliantly collaborate with them to get an introduction to, a new provider in my area.
What type of insights are important? What type of insights do you usually bring back to the company? And can you expand more on how those insights drive medical strategy?
A lot of the things that we do bring back are gaps in knowledge. Like, what else do we need to know about, the compounds that we have? What types of patients have, we not gotten data on? What are the diversity and inclusion types of our trials? Are we doing enough for diversity and inclusion? We take a lot back around guidelines around whether practitioners are following the guidelines for treatment. If they're not following the guidelines, what are the gaps? What do they need? Do they need more education? Can we provide that? Things like that we can bring back to the company in order to meet the needs of what's going on in the area that we are responsible for. So some of those things are, really important to the company. Plus, in terms of competitor products, what's going on with other compounds that are similar in class to yours. You would get a lot of information at major medical meetings where you'd be attending symposium. We bring things like that back to the company. We bring opinions of people back to the company about what they think of the compounds that we currently have. What are the types of things that we could be researching, with regard to the compounds that we're not presently doing, things like that. Teresa, I'll put it to you.
Yes, I would agree. I think not only data gaps, but also maybe roadblocks that providers are experiencing, both with the particular medication or with the therapeutic area in general, because sometimes if we can identify those roadblocks, there are sometimes things that, the company can do to drive their strategy to help eliminate some of those roadblocks. So, being able to bring back information on, gaps in the data as well as, roadblocks. Because a lot of times, the science might be very strong, but, it has more to do with, institutional roadblocks. And, if there are ways that we can help remove some of those, that can be a valuable insight.
Are these insights that you're mentioning something that's commonly brought up in your meetings with KOLs or with HCPs, or is this a checklist that you have in your mind that you want to gather with every meeting that you have in order to bring back?
I think it's both. I think there are some insights that you're actually looking for, but the best insights really just come from the peer-to-peer discussions that you're having with people, where they're very candid with you, especially when you've had a good trust relationship with them, and they're really looking for your help around things, right? They're asking for your guidance as to how to remove, as Teresa said, some of the roadblocks that they're encountering. So it's just that discussion. Those insights will come. There are some things that we're looking to gain insight around, and to your point, you do go prepared with some of the things that you want to get information on. But again, the best insights come just from those conversations that we have. That's why we're highly valued, the peer-to-peer discussions that we have, because we are clinicians as they are, and they will have those candid discussions with us. And we do learn a lot, and we're able to bring those insights back.
Really good insight. One more follow-up question are these insights, right, especially ones that you deem are important that your leaders should know in order to shape that medical strategy, are these insights something that you just document, right, in your CRM after your relationship or after your meeting with an HCP? Or is it something that you identify as a flag, not a bad flag, but you say, hey, this is very important. I need to discuss this. So how do you relay those insights to leadership to shape that strategy?
So we do have those discussions regularly with our medical team. An insight is not an insight if it doesn't go anywhere, right? If you just document it somewhere, nobody, an insight needs to be actionable, right? So if you bring an insight back, and if it's a good insight, it's something that you could act upon. So we would just not leave it lie. We would try to develop an action plan around it. Say there was a gap in a knowledge point about one of our compounds, we would develop an education plan around it, something like that, where if there's a need, and it's been identified by several people. Maybe it's a trend. Maybe it's not just one person that has this opinion. Maybe it's 10 people. Maybe it's 20 people. All of those are important, and we bring it back to the company. Hopefully it's actionable and something that we could do something about.
I would say that, in my experience, I've seen different ways of handling insights. I've seen them entered in the CRM, like you mentioned. I've seen separate platforms for insight gathering that break it down by different topics, so that it helps a little bit in guiding your thought process when you're preparing for a meeting. If you know what general areas of insights your company might be looking for. If it's a very hot topic, I've also seen things like Microsoft Teams channels devoted to real-time insights. I've seen that real-time insight Teams channel during national conferences where the insights might be coming in with new data being presented and things like that. And then I've also seen companies that will collect their insights and analyze them, look for trends and everything, and then share that information back out with a team so that you can not only, you've gathered and you've learned from your insights from your territory, but you're able to see the insights from your whole team. And I think that can be beneficial on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, I completely agree. Discussing insights with the whole team is very, very important. This way, everybody can see what the general topic of conversation is out there, and it will be more national in scope rather than just maybe regional. Maybe the insight that you brought back, maybe you thought it was regional, and come to find out that it's really a national type of a scope. So, not discussing it as a medical team really is a detriment. You really need to be able to have those kind of discussions broadly. We do that routinely as well.
Thank you. Great insights on insights. What differentiates a great MSL? In other words, how do you measure the performance of MSLs personally?
I think you can look at outcomes. Are you affecting things? Are you making things better, in terms of your healthcare community that you are responsible for? What are the outcomes of the efforts that you've put into your therapeutic area? You don't just measure activities, number of activities, how many times you're in the field, how many people you see. That doesn't tell you much. What tells you things is, did you move the needle? Did you do something that was impactful to either solve a problem or raise the level of expertise of somebody, or help a system of care get to where they wanted to be in terms of helping them move the needle? What did you do to affect change? That's what makes a great MSL. Not number of activities, not the number of people you see, but what did you do to move the needle?
I would agree with all of that. And one thing I would add is just, not only those external contributions and, building relationships with key opinion leaders and providers, but also I think, part of the performance of an MSL is, how they can contribute internally too, working on special projects, and even just the level of discussion that you have with your MSL and cross-functional colleagues, how you're contributing that way too, can help measure the performance of an MSL.
That's great. I think we're coming to time. Also, to add on to Rachel's answer here, it's easy to compare, to me, in my mind, the evaluation of an MSL, those KPIs. They're more qualitative versus a sales rep, which is quantitative. I think we have a blog post actually that goes into depth as to what that really means for the MSL and the pharma sales role as well. Right, so we've covered a lot of ground today over this past hour, from the impact of MSLs, their interactions that they have, insights, all the way to the strategies for success in this role. Thank you all for joining us today. Your thoughtful questions were very helpful in furthering this conversation. If we weren't able to answer your question, please join us for our future webinars. This will not be our only MSL webinar. If this is something you're interested in, let us know so we can have more webinars that you are looking for. Again, thank you all for joining us today. Janet, Teresa, thank you so much. We're so grateful for you to be able to join us today and answer our questions and explain more about the MSL role.
Thanks for having us. It was a pleasure.
Of course. With that, I will go ahead and close out the webinar. Please follow us on LinkedIn. If you have any questions about the BCMS program, our website is medicalaffairsspecialist.org. This webinar's recording will be posted on our website so that you can go back, refresh, and recap any information that you may have missed. With that, have a great Wednesday, everyone. We will see you next time.